to answer the most. And after the presentation, we'll have some time to go through your questions and hopefully give you some answers. So let's get straight in to our presentation. The focus of the webinar today is on understanding a direct question essay. And we're going to look at a simple structure that will help you to plan your essay and make a very clear structure for the examiner. We'll also be looking at a range of key language that will help you to develop your argument. That's including linkers to structure your argument and appropriate tenses to make sure that your grammar is accurate. So the first step to writing a task 2 is to read the question. This is a direct question type. In recent years, the family structure has changed, as well as family roles. What are the changes occurring? Do you think these changes are positive or negative? Give reasons for your answer and include any relevant examples from your own knowledge or experience. The first step is to read the question, and you can notice that this type of question has different parts. A typical direct question will have a lead-in statement to begin with. In this case, in recent years, the family structure has changed, as well as family roles. For this type of question, for the leading statement, you're not expected to argue about this or debate it. You take this as a fact that the family structure has changed. And you should focus your attention on the 2 or 3 questions which follow that lead-in statement. So here, what are the changes occurring? And do you think these changes are positive and negative? These are the 2 questions you're expected to answer. Now that you've identified the different parts of the question, the next step is to underline the key words to make sure that you're directly answering the question. So what I'd like you to do is read through the question, and in the chat, can you suggest which key words you would underline in this question? Thank you, Jehan. Structure, Marielle, family structure, role as well, changes. Excellent. Yeah. And any other ones for the questions? Okay. Thank you, Jumin. Positive or negative? Exactly. So take a look at the words I've highlighted here. Family structure has changed. Okay. And also family roles. Now, this is interesting because in the leading statement, there are 2 parts. It's asking us to talk about changes to the family structure and also the family roles. So these are slightly different things, and an ideal answer will discuss both changes to the structure and changes to the role. Okay. In the 2 questions, what are the changes occurring? We need to describe these changes to the structure and to the role. And we also need to say whether these changes are positive or negative. Okay, so 2 parts. This is why this question type is sometimes called a 2-part question, as well as a direct question essay. Now, the final step to understanding the question is to decide on your overall response. This is, in very general terms, what is your answer to these 2 questions in an outline? So given that there's 2 parts, we need to discuss the first question, changes in family structure and roles. What have these changes been? And we also need to describe whether these, or give an opinion over whether these changes are positive or negative. So in the chat, could you make some suggestions for the changes that have taken place in family structure and family roles, ideally one of each, a change in family structure and a change in family role. Hi, Mark, thank you. You've suggested house husbands as a change, smaller families, more single parents, excellent. Yep, wives are working, Mila, thank you. Fantastic, an isolated life, very good. Yeah, and you've successfully identified some of the main points that I prepared earlier. So for myself, I thought one issue is that grandparents no longer live with families. Often nowadays, the parents will live together with their children, but the grandparents will live elsewhere. So that's one change. Another change, not necessarily very recent, but it is a significant change, is that women are much more likely to have a career in the past than they were previously. So these are two changes. All the changes I've seen suggested in the chat also look acceptable as well. Now, thinking about these two changes, are they positive or negative? What do you think? Grandparents no longer living with their families, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Thank you. Dapo, you've said that's negative, generally negative, and I agree. I've said it's negative because older people may become lonely and also they're unable to support their families. So that's one negative aspect of this change. What about my second point? Women are much more likely to have a career than in the past. And generally, people are responding positive, and I would definitely agree. I think this is a very positive development. It means there's greater freedom and more opportunities for women. So some teachers might encourage you to only choose positives or negatives together and not to mix them. And that's very, very good advice. If you're a bit more confident in your writing and it's a more complex topic, you can mix the two. And in this presentation, I'm going to show you an example of how you can express both positive and negative changes clearly. So now that we've got our overall response, we're going to look at a simple structure for planning your direct question. And the good news is for a direct question essay, the structure is very, very simple. It's as follows. You'll have an introduction with 2 sentences. The first sentence, you'll paraphrase the question, paraphrasing the lead-in statement specifically. The second sentence is an outline statement. You'll then have a second paragraph, we'll call that body paragraph A, where you will directly answer the first question. That will be your topic sentence. You'll then give some reasons and give an example to support those reasons. And then for paragraph B, you'll simply directly answer the second question in your topic sentence, give some reasons to support that answer, and give an example. Finally, you need a conclusion where you summarize your answers to both of the questions. So this is a simple 4-paragraph plan for a direct question essay. And we're going to look at each of these paragraphs individually now. So first up, we have the introduction. We need to paraphrase the lead-in statement to begin with. To do that, we can use synonyms, we can use word form, we can use word order, and we can change the voice from active to passive. These are 4 different ways of paraphrasing, restating the statement in a different way, using different words and grammar to express the same idea. Here is an example I prepared earlier. Could you help me to complete the gaps in this paraphrased statement. And is that Saeed, I can see you've mentioned the word decades here. Yeah, and that's exactly the one I've chosen to paraphrase the word years. Exactly. Over the last few decades, it's similar enough. So what about the next part, the traditional family? Component structure is good. System, format. These are, Rushan, you have hit the nail on the head with the traditional family unit. Exactly. This is a nice collocation. Traditional family unit. The traditional family unit has experienced significant changes. Thank you, Marielle. Exactly. Here, I've kept the same word, changed, but I've changed it from a verb, which is in the lead-in, to a noun, changes. So just changing the word form, which also counts as paraphrasing. And Huma and Mark, thank you, both in terms of structure and in the roles played by each family member. Exactly. So this is a very nice lead-in sentence, introducing the topic, showing that you're addressing the question. We now need to have an outline statement. This is telling the reader that you're going to answer both questions. So you want to mention both questions in your outline statement. And you can introduce it like this. You can say, this essay will, what word? Thank you, Jumin. This essay will discuss, exactly. You can also say consider. Both are acceptable here. This essay will consider, this essay will discuss the nature of these changes and discuss, thank you, Selim, whether they are. Thank you, Marielle. You've said positive or negative. Jason, you've mentioned a different word, which is beneficial. Thank you, Evelyn. Beneficial or harmful to families in today's society. So here I've mentioned both questions. I've touched on what are the nature of the changes and are they positive or negative. You can see here useful language, the present perfect, to describe a change from the past to now, has experienced. I'm also mentioning two aspects of the changes. So you can use language like both in terms of the structure and the roles to show that you're going to discuss two different aspects of a topic. And then for your outline statement, this essay will consider and discuss whether. This is a nice way to introduce the two questions. Okay, moving on now to your body paragraphs. We're going to start by talking about body paragraph 1. And the main idea of this paragraph is going to be changes in family structure and roles. So the first thing we need to do is directly answer the first question. And this will be in your topic sentence, which could look something like this. From my perspective, there are two major differences between families in the and. Thank you, Vangelita. Yep, in the past and now, exactly. There are two major differences in the past and now. This is telling the reader I'm introducing my main ideas. So my first main idea, the role of the extended family has changed dramatically. What linking word could I use to introduce the first main idea? Maya and Huma, you've got it 100%. Firstly, this is my first main point. Some of you are suggesting the word however. Now, this, however, you would use that to introduce a contrast, an opposite point of view. But we want to introduce the first point. So I've said there are two main differences. Firstly, my first point is this. So firstly, the role of the extended family has changed dramatically. We can now start giving reasons. Grandparents would often live together with their children, providing them with support. Jihan, earlier, in the past, very good. You're all identifying a past time marker. Jumin, you got it. Traditionally. All of these would be acceptable. Previously, in the past, grandparents would often live together with their children, providing them with support. Now, I want to give an example to support this reason. And my example I've chosen to give is childcare. How could we introduce this example? Utkarsh, very good. For instance, Thang, such as. Mark, you've said through. These are all correct. Here I've chosen to use such as to introduce my example. Okay. This is my first main point, that grandparents no longer live with families. I want to introduce my second point. So I can say another major change. Another major change is the role of the breadwinner. In the past, men were typically expected to work. Thank you, Muskan. Yes, many of you are posting the correct linker here. That is while women stayed at home. This is contrasting. In the past, men would typically work while women stayed at home. These days, women are much more likely to have a job and support their family in this way. And again, here, thank you, Vishne and Talha, I'm introducing a contrast. So here I can use the linker, however, because I'm contrasting women staying at home in the past with women more likely to have a job today. So a linker of contrast is more appropriate. So you can see the different linking expressions I've used here, and I'd encourage you to use them to show contrast, to give reasons, to give examples, to frame your sentences. I'd also encourage you to use and to focus on using appropriate tenses. And I've highlighted some here to introduce the change, the difference. You can use the present tense. There are two major differences. To describe a change from the past to now, you can use the present perfect. It has changed. We then start talking about the past. And here I've used the expression would often. Traditionally, grandparents would often live together. Now, this is a nice form because it implies a repeated action in the past. It's something that people used to do on a regular basis that perhaps they don't do anymore. Can you think of another past tense form that would carry the same meaning here? A repeated action in the past. Excellent. Thank you, Nuri. Angela, exactly. Used to. Traditionally, grandparents used to live together with their children. Both are fine here, both would work. Uh, we've also got the past tense, were expected to work, women stayed at home, contrasted with the past tense. Now, with the present tense, excuse me, women are much more likely to have a job. So uh, it's it's good to focus on which tense you're using for an event in the past or something that's true now. Now, moving on to the second body paragraph, we're going to follow exactly the same structure. We're going to use a topic sentence that directly answers the second question, which is, are these changes positive or negative? And as I mentioned, we've decided to say that the changes are negative because older people may become lonely and are unable to support their families. But there's also a positive side that women have greater freedom and more opportunities. So I'm going to introduce my second paragraph by saying these changes have had both positive and negative impacts. Now, which word here? Very good. Is it Alexandra? Akanksha. In my view, in my point of view, thank you. Now here the question is asking me, are these changes positive or negative? This is like my opinion. So I'm going to say and make it very clear I'm giving my opinion by saying, in my opinion, okay? Some of you have been saying, on the other hand. Now, on the other hand would not be quite correct because on the other hand is a contrast again, but you're not really contrasting with the previous question. You're saying it's a new topic. It's not, again, however, wouldn't be appropriate here. You're developing the topic, not contrasting the topic. So in my opinion, would be more appropriate here. Next up, we want to give some reasons for my view. So the first of all, the lack of support from grandparents means that parents might need to arrange babysitters for their children. Okay, this is a negative impact of grandparents living away from the family home. And we can support this reason with an example. Okay? And here I've said it can be expensive. How can I connect this example? Excellent. And many people are correctly pointing out that this is a relative clause. You can use the word which to introduce your example to support your reason here. And this is a nice way of chaining together your ideas so that they're very coherent. And it adds complexity to your writing, which is one of the criteria for a band 7, a band 8, okay, using complex sentences. Now, we have one reason why this is a negative impact. Another reason is that older people may become isolated from their families, contributing to loneliness. Okay, so this is a second reason. Joshua, you've said in addition, moreover, additionally, furthermore. Thank you, Jehan. This is absolutely correct. Any of those linkers you can use to add a further point. This is a linker of addition rather than contrast because you're giving a further point in support of your idea. Okay, so we've talked about the negative impacts. I now need to go on to describe the positive impacts. And I've said that the changing roles of the modern family has resulted in greater freedom for women. Now, how can I link this idea? And David, here you go. David, you've said, however, on the other hand, by contrast, I would probably say in contrast rather than by contrast, but both are okay there. Yes, Jumin, nevertheless. Someone said on the flip side. This is a correct expression, but it's probably not formal enough for academic writing. So I wouldn't say on the flip side. I would say, however, on the other hand, in contrast. This is more formal. And this is the one I have in fact chosen. On the other hand, the changing roles of the changing roles of the modern family has resulted in greater freedom for women. And we can support that with an example by saying who. So another relative clause, who can now choose to pursue a career which interests them while contributing to their family's financial security. Okay, this is giving some extra information. Jason, you mentioned whereas as a contrast linker. I think whereas is not strong enough here. Whereas would be used in the middle of a sentence to contrast two ideas. But here you need a connecting word at the beginning of the sentence. Whereas cannot really perform that role. Okay? So, and again, guys, if you do have questions, please feel free to add them to the Q&A box, and we will get onto them at the end of today's presentation. So, in addition to these different linkers, we also have some useful language. Can anyone tell me the form here that's used with have had? And for a bonus point, why is it used? Thank you, Anne-Marie. Is the present perfect? Why are we using the present perfect here? And to express a result, exactly, Amir, Tursanai, exactly. We're talking about a result, something that started in the past, and you can see the result of it now. So we're using the present perfect to express that, the changes that have happened. Okay. We also have some modal verbs here. Can anyone point out the modal verbs in the chat? Which modal verbs have I used? You might, yep. May and can, exactly. And why am I using these modals? What purpose do they have in the paragraph? Very good, Samira. You've said it's tentative. That is absolutely right. You cannot say for sure. The modal verbs, I'm talking about possible impacts, impacts that we're not 100% sure they're happening, and it will make your writing sound more academic, more formal, because if you say something may happen, it could happen, it sounds more, can I say this, balanced. You're not saying this will definitely happen. You're saying it could happen. It might happen. It sounds more considered, more thoughtful. So these are useful verbs to use to improve the quality of your writing. especially when talking about the impacts, whether they're positive or negative. Okay, excellent. Now we can move on to look at the conclusion. In your conclusion, you're simply trying to summarize your answers to both questions. So you don't want to introduce new information or new ideas. You are just rephrasing, paraphrasing what you have already said in a very concise way. You also are restating your overall response. So our overall response was that there are two changes in family structure and roles. Grandparents no longer live with families, and women are much more likely to have a career than in the past. And we decided that there are positive and negative effects of this. I'm going to say that it's generally positive because I think that the freedom for women is, such a great development that it, to some extent, it outweighs the isolation of older people. So that's my general response. As I said, we don't want to introduce any new ideas. So how can we introduce our conclusion? To summarize, thank you, Gurpreet. This is to sum up. Nuri, to conclude. Amirali, exactly. Overall, Maya, you've said all things considered. This is okay. Again, possibly not formal enough. I would stick with in conclusion, to sum up, to conclude. All of these are very precise, very formal. So let me share with you my conclusion. In conclusion, I would argue that. Okay, I'm now giving my opinion to make it very clear. Julia, you've mentioned taking into the account the above. Is it formal enough? Yes, yeah, that is formal. And Jehan, you've said, is argue too strong? No, I would say if you say I would argue enough, this shows that you are, it makes your opinion very clear to the examiner. You're saying, this is my opinion, okay? And Tursanai, you've said, do we have to choose one side? And this is the first part of my conclusion. In conclusion, I would argue that the changes experienced by families in today's society are generally positive. As women now have greater opportunities to pursue a career, this is my first statement, okay? And I'm going to introduce the other point of view now to contrast. How could I present my other main point, which is there's some negatives? Exactly, using however, okay, or in contrast. So here I've said, however, in my opinion, the isolation of older people is a problem which society should attempt to address. So I've summarized both my main positions here by saying that it's generally positive. However, there's also some negative impacts as well. In the conclusion, Jan, it's good to make your opinion clear. It's fine to finish with your opinion. You want to summarize your answer, and the question is asking you directly to say, do you think it's positive or negative? So it's okay to give your opinion. Um, Rishikesh, that's a good question. Are we repeating, in my opinion? Because we used that expression earlier. Yeah, I mean, we've used it twice. I don't think this will affect your band to repeat this expression. Don't feel that you need to paraphrase every single item because you'll end up with some very strange language that doesn't sound natural. So it's okay, to repeat the same expression once or twice. As long as you're not repeating over and over again, that's fine. Um, Samira, you've asked, can the negative opinions be stressed strongly in an argument? Absolutely. If you think that, the changes to family have been completely negative, say that. You're not being judged, you're not being graded on your opinion. Like there is no correct opinion or incorrect opinion. It's purely about the quality of your language and how you connect your ideas. If your ideas are logical, then your opinion can be as positive or as negative as you like. Okay, fantastic, guys. Well, we are running up to the time for question and answer. So I'm going to open up your questions and we can take a look at some of your questions here. So our first question is from Talha Said. And the question is, what if you have very little knowledge about the topic? Um, you know, Sometimes you'll get a question that you don't have any, um, you feel like you don't have any knowledge about it. Well, I wouldn't worry about that too much because all the IELTS writing, and in fact, every question in IELTS, it's not based on specialist knowledge. It should be a question that anyone can answer using general knowledge. So, think of examples for yourself from your own experience. If you really have no clue about, specific examples, you can make them up. You don't need to, cite scientific research. You don't need to cite a newspaper. You can, for example, in this essay, you could say, research has shown that, many older people are suffering from loneliness in today's society. Now, perhaps you didn't read that, you've never read any research about it, but that's fine to say that. The examiner will not go away and check that you actually, that your example is accurate. So I wouldn't worry about that. The next question we have is from Roland. Is it necessary to discuss the thesis statement with this essay will discuss? Because some references are telling it should not be used, or saying it should not be used. This is a good question, Roland. There are different ways to introduce your thesis statement or your outline statement. It's absolutely fine to say this essay will discuss, and it's very, very clear. I've spoken about this with various examiners, and the response has been, this is a very clear way to present your thesis. And it's a simple structure, but it will ensure that you're clear. There are other ways to present it, but I think this is a simple one that you're welcome to use. For Ayu, it's from Ayu Novita. Is all the words that I wrote enough for the minimum amount of words for the writing test? And it absolutely is. I did a word count and it was 257 words, which is just above the minimum. You need to write 250 words minimum, and you won't be penalized if you write just slightly above that. Okay. David, you've asked, what band would I give this essay? The example we've looked at in the webinar, I would say this is a band 9 for every category, a band 9 essay. It is accurate grammar, it has logical development of the ideas, it uses a range of vocabulary accurately, and it's the task achievement. It answers the question directly. So that actually relates to Tanali, your question in the chat, which is what are the key points the evaluation panel is looking for. And as I mentioned, there are 4 criteria for the IELTS writing for task 2. The first one is task achievement. This is, did you directly answer the question and did you cover all the points? So in this case, if you had just talked about family roles and not about family structure, you might not get full marks for task achievement because you only answered part of the question. It's the same if you only gave an opinion about the changes without describing them in detail. So that's the first criteria. The second criteria is grammatical range and accuracy. And this is, do you use a wide range of language? And are you able to use it accurately? So this is using a range of different tenses and using them appropriately. The third criteria is lexical resource. So this is using a wide range of vocabulary and using it accurately as well. Balachandar, you've said, do we need to use idioms? And this is related to lexical resource. You do not need to use idioms, but you do need to use less frequent items. So I would advise against using very cliched idioms in your presentation, in your essay. But you'll notice that I used some collocations like family unit, for example. This is a nice collocation that shows that I'm familiar with some more advanced language. Going back, I'm going to find another example of some useful language for you. For example, language like pursue a career. Pursue a career. This is a collocation, a very specific combination of verbs and nouns, which shows that you have awareness of this type of language. And this is enough to push you up to get a high score, possibly a band 8 for the test. Again, the isolation of older people. This is a nice phrase as well, a nice noun phrase that expresses a very specific idea. So you wouldn't need to use idioms per se, as long as you're using very specific language. So the final category is coherency and cohesion. And this is to do with planning and to do with how your essay links together. Are your ideas clear? Are they logical? Are they well developed? And you can achieve this by following the structure that we looked at earlier on, by answering the question, giving an example, giving reasons, and then giving an example for each of your points. This is to do with coherency, how logical your ideas connect with each other. here we go. Here's the structure there. So as long as you're developing your main points, this will help you to get a high band for coherency. Now, there are two aspects to coherency and cohesion. The second part is cohesion, which is to do with using, linking your ideas together using grammar. So here, for example, you can say using things like pronouns. So if you say, this essay will consider the nature of these changes. Here, these changes is referring back to the changes we mentioned earlier, significant changes. So this expression, this pronoun these, refers back, and that will increase your score for cohesion as well. So your essay will be both coherent because the ideas link together, and cohesive because the language signposts the reader to the same ideas. Okay, excellent. So that's the 4 criteria. Let's take a look at another question. Akanksha, you've said in the second essay, instead of 250, can we go up to 300? And would we be marked negatively for that? Very simple answer, no, you won't be marked down for additional words, but you might find that you want to focus more on quality rather than quantity. If you can write 300 high quality words in 40 minutes, that's great, but it's a very challenging task. So I would focus on writing closer to the word limit, 250 to 280 words, but quality words. Okay. Kuldeep, you've mentioned if you make a mistake while writing, what's the best way to correct it? You can simply cross out the mistake, put a line through it and carry on writing. The examiner will ignore anything on the answer sheet that you have put a line through. So don't worry about starting again or trying to erase anything. Just put a line through the bit that you don't want the examiner to see. Okay. Next question from Vishnavi. Can we stop writing once we complete 150 words, or do we have to extend it more? The word limit for task 2 is 250 words. So please don't stop writing at 150. Write up to 250 and beyond to be on the safe side. I would aim for about 260 words, 280 words would be fine. Also, and related to this, don't try to count your words in the test. You won't have enough time to go through and count each word to make sure that you're reaching the word limit. What I would suggest you do is go on to the IELTS website, download the practice test paper, the answer sheet. You can get a copy of that on the website, and you can do your practice tasks on that question paper, on the answer paper. And after you've done a few of the practice tasks, you'll be able to see how many words you write per line and what 250 words looks like for you on that answer paper. So you'll know, okay, if I write this many lines, that's going to take me to 250, 260 words. So you don't have to waste any time in the test counting words. You can do that before then. Okay. Femi, you've asked, can the body paragraphs be extended to 3 rather than 2? Absolutely. Sometimes the direct question will have 3 questions, not just 2. In that case, you can follow exactly the same process. You would just add an additional body paragraph with the exact same structure as that. Okay. You might even want to add an additional paragraph if you have lots of ideas. You don't want to write them in one long paragraph. Add another paragraph. 3 paragraphs is fine. Let's see. Salim, you've said, should we clearly state that the given case is positive or negative, or can we give a neutral answer? That's a good question. If typically the question will ask you to give an opinion, do you think it's positive or do you think it's negative? You have 3 options there. The first one is to say, I think it's entirely positive, and give 2 reasons why. You can also say, I think it's entirely negative, and give 2 reasons why. Or you can take the approach that I took in this example, where you can say, I think it's both positive and negative, and give 1 reason for each. But the idea of giving a neutral answer, I would avoid that, because then you're not answering the question. The question's asked you, do you think it's positive or negative? You must say one of those 3 options: completely positive, completely negative, or positive and negative. Okay. Talha, you've said, can the summary or the conclusion be ended with just 1 sentence? Yes, it can be. You can write a short conclusion with 1 sentence summarizing both the questions in the direct question. You don't need to write a long conclusion. You might like to break it into 2 parts if it's going to be very long. Okay. Julia, you've mentioned, where do you get all these tests? These are crowdsourced on IELTSonlinetests.com. All the tests have been sent in or collated from around the internet. So these are previous actual tests and authentic examples of tests. So hope that answers your question. And I should say, if you would like additional practice with the direct question, you can go on to the IELTSonlineTest.com website. If you go to the practice test, volume 1, test 3, this is a similar type of question. It's a direct question which you can answer in exactly the same way as the question we've just been looking at. That is real actual practice test, volume 1, test number 3. It's a direct question. So I would encourage you to go on to the website and try submitting a practice answer. We also have a service, it's a paid for service, where an IELTS examiner can, you submit your essay and the IELTS assessor will read through your essay, give it a grade, and write a report for you, giving you feedback on the strengths and weaknesses and what you can do to improve your score. So if that's something you're interested in, you can go onto our website and you can try out that service to get a better idea of what you need to do to get a high score in the writing test. We also have a similar service for the speaking test as well, where you can carry out a full mock test with an IELTS examiner, and they will give you a lot of detailed feedback on your strengths and weaknesses. So you can check that out on our website if that's interesting for you. We have time for a couple more questions. Tanali, you've said you'd like to watch the discussion again. Can we share the link? Absolutely. The link will be on our Facebook page. So you can join up to our Facebook page, which is IELTSonlinetest.com. And this webinar with the slides and our previous webinars will be online for you to see. This is a free webinar, so we would just encourage you, please share this page and the links with your friends, with your colleagues, and contribute to the Facebook page with your answers and your ideas. Okay. We have a bit more time for some questions, so if you have any final questions, please post them up, and we'll get through some of them. So let's see. Asan, you've said, can we give an emotional reason? So, I mean, is this something like, I don't like the change in family because it makes me feel bad? That would be okay, but you would need to support that with a reason. Because, I am not, I think the changes have been negative because. So just saying an emotion, this won't help develop your argument. You need to give reasons to support your beliefs. Yeah. Mark, you've said in paragraph 3, when you're stating the positive and negative, I listed 2 reasons for the positive. Is it required to have multiple reasons, or is only one reason sufficient? That's right. Mark, I would say that one reason is enough. I thought that there were 2 main points I wanted to discuss, so I introduced both of them. One is okay. You don't need to give multiple reasons. If you give a reason and an example, that should be enough. Okay. I have a question from Mika. The IELTS Facebook, the Facebook name for our group is IELTS, IELTS online tests.com. And thank you guys for sharing this. Thank you, Kai, exactly. So yeah, it's a nice community. Lots of people comment on the videos, sharing the videos. It's great to see. Okay. Let's see. Fang, you've mentioned, and this will have to be our final question, that IELTS teachers usually ask to have 5 different structures: simple sentence, complex sentence, compound sentence. You do not need to have all 5 of these different structures, but you do need to show a range of different structures, Fang. So don't worry about including all of them, but try to have a range of them, 3 or 4 different types that are appropriate to the question type. Okay. Everyone, thank you very much. We've run out of time for this week. We're going to have another webinar next Wednesday on a different topic. This is the agree-disagree question. So please feel free to sign up on our website, IELTSonlinetest.com. You can go ahead and try a practice test on that website too. That's volume 1, test 3. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today, and best of luck with your writing. I hope to see you all again. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure. I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.